My name is Mattie Reynolds, 56 years old, and I've always prided myself on being a good mother to my daughter Kimberly. We were close once before designer labels and social climbing became her priorities. When Kimberly got engaged to Aaron from the wealthy Caldwell family, I was thrilled, until I called to ask about the engagement dinner, and she casually replied, "Oh, we already had it yesterday. Just close family." That hurt was just the beginning. A week later, my phone rang with her panicked voice. "The card didn't go through. Did you forget to pay the bill?" I'd love to hear where you're watching from today. If you've ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love, hit that like button and subscribe to hear what I said next, and how it changed everything between us. I became a single mother the summer Kimberly turned 10, when my husband Mark decided that family life was too restrictive for his creative spirit. What that actually meant was he'd fallen for a younger colleague at the advertising agency where he worked. The divorce was quick but painful. Mark moved across the country with his new girlfriend, and over time his phone calls and child support payments became increasingly sporadic. Those early years alone with Kimberly forged what I thought was an unbreakable bond between us. We were a team, figuring out our new normal together. I'd owned a small independent bookstore in our town for several years, and after the divorce, that business became our financial lifeline. It wasn't lucrative, but it paid the bills and allowed me flexible hours to be there for Kimberly after school and during summers. Money was always tight. I remember countless nights at the kitchen table with calculator in hand, trying to stretch our budget to cover basics, while still setting aside something for Kimberly's future. There were years I went without new clothes or dental work to make sure she could join the school choir's trip to New York or attend the summer dance program she loved. Despite our limited means, I was determined that Kimberly would have opportunities. I managed to keep her in the private school she'd attended since kindergarten, not wanting to disrupt her education on top of the family upheaval. This meant working extra hours, adding author events and children's story times at the bookstore to increase revenue. Sometimes I sold rare books from my personal collection when unexpected expenses arose. Through it all, Kimberly and I remained close. As a young teen, she would help at the bookstore after school, recommending young adult novels to customers with such enthusiasm that sales in that section doubled. At home, we had our little rituals: Sunday pancake breakfasts, Friday movie nights with homemade popcorn, and summer road trips in our aging Volvo to visit my sister in Virginia. Kimberly was bright, creative, and kind back then. She excelled in school and showed genuine compassion for others. I remember how she organized a book drive for the Children's Hospital when she was 14, collecting over 500 books. I was so proud of her initiative and empathy. The subtle changes began during her high school years at Westridge Academy. Many of her classmates came from wealthy families, and I started noticing Kimberly's growing awareness of social hierarchies. She became more conscious of brands, more interested in where people vacationed or what cars they drove. Still, she remained grounded enough to laugh about the more ridiculous status symbols her friends coveted. When Kimberly was accepted to Benton University, a prestigious private college, several states away, I was torn between pride and panic. The financial aid package was decent, but nowhere near enough. I remortgaged our house, took out loans in my name, and dipped into what little retirement savings I had. I never told Kimberly the extent of these sacrifices. I wanted her to focus on her education without worrying about money. It was during those college years that I noticed more significant changes in my daughter. She joined an exclusive sorority and began dating boys from wealthy backgrounds. Her calls home became less frequent, and when we did talk, she shared less about her thoughts and feelings, focusing instead on social events and achievements. Her major shifted from English literature, which she had once loved, to business, with an emphasis on luxury brand management. Before her junior year, I helped Kimberly get her first credit card, adding her as an authorized user on my account to help build her credit history. Just for emergencies, I told her, and small everyday expenses to establish your credit record. I paid the bill each month, reviewing the charges with her to teach financial responsibility. Over time, those small everyday expenses grew. Designer coffee became designer clothes. Textbooks became spring break trips to Cancun. Each time I expressed concern, Kimberly had justifications, networking opportunities, investing in her professional image, keeping up with her peer group. And each time I relented, wanting to support her success however I could. After graduation, Kimberly moved to Chicago for a job at a high-end marketing firm. I assumed she would get her own credit card then, but she suggested keeping our arrangement just until I get established. Somehow 4 years passed with this temporary arrangement becoming permanent. The statements showed shopping sprees at Nordstrom dinners, at trendy restaurants, weekend getaways with friends, a lifestyle far beyond what her entry-level salary should have supported. I continued paying those bills, dipping further into my retirement savings, telling myself it was just until she got her next promotion or bonus. Whenever I tried to discuss financial independence, Kimberly would grow defensive or change the subject. Our conversations became primarily transactional, her calling when she needed something, especially money. 2 years ago, Kimberly met Aaron Caldwell at a charity gala. The Caldwells owned a chain of luxury hotels and were fixtures in Chicago's social scene. When Kimberly brought Aaron to visit for a weekend, I tried to make a good impression, despite feeling intimidated by his pedigree. I prepared her favorite childhood meals and showed him around our small town. Aaron was polite but somewhat detached. He commented on the quaintness of my bookstore, with a tone that felt more condescending than complimentary. When I mentioned my love of classic literature, he remarked that his mother collected rare first editions, as investments, of course. The implication being that my paperback copies of Austen and Dickens were somehow less worthy. Throughout their visit, I noticed how Kimberly seemed to be performing a role around him, laughing a little too loudly at his jokes, deferring to his opinions, even adjusting her accent slightly. She barely mentioned our family traditions or shared memories, as if pruning away parts of herself that didn't fit his expectations. After they left, our already infrequent calls became even rarer. Kimberly was always swamped with work or at an event with Aaron. When we did speak, she talked endlessly about the Caldwells, their summer home in the Hamptons, their connections in New York, the charity boards Aaron's mother chaired. I listened and offered enthusiastic responses, genuinely happy that she seemed excited about her life. But beneath my supportive exterior, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. My daughter was drifting away, becoming someone I barely recognized, someone who seemed increasingly embarrassed by her modest upbringing, and the mother who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at success. I discovered Kimberly and Aaron were engaged through Instagram. I was scrolling through my feed one Tuesday morning before opening the bookstore, when I saw it a photo of Kimberly's hand sporting an enormous diamond ring tagged with hashtag she said yes and hash future Mrs. Caldwell. My heart stopped, then raced. My own daughter hadn't even called to tell me she was engaged. For several minutes I just stared at the image, trying to process my feelings. Joy for her happiness, certainly, but also a profound hurt that I hadn't been included in this momentous news. The comments section was filled with congratulations from friends I'd never heard of, along with several from Aaron's family members. His mother had written, "Welcome to the family, darling. We couldn't be more thrilled." I waited all day for Kimberly to call. When my phone remained silent, I finally called her that evening. "Kimberly, congratulations, sweetheart. I just saw the news on Instagram. I'm so happy for you," I said, working to keep any hint of hurt from my voice. "Oh, thanks, Mum," she replied, sounding distracted. I could hear voices and music in the background. "Yeah, Aaron proposed at the Langham on Saturday. It was perfect." "That's wonderful. I want to hear all about it. How did he ask?" Were you surprised? Mum, can I call you back later? We're at dinner with some friends celebrating. Of course, honey. I'm just so excited for you. Call when you can. She didn't call back that night, or the next day. When she finally did call 3 days later, it was brief and felt like an obligation. She hurried through details of the proposal, barely pausing for my reactions. Then, just as I thought we were wrapping up, she mentioned the engagement dinner casually. So, what time is the engagement dinner tomorrow? I asked already, mentally planning what I would wear and the thoughtful gift I would bring. There was a pause on the line before Kimberly answered. Oh, we already had it yesterday. Just close family. The words hit me like a physical blow. Just close family, implying I wasn't close family. I see. I managed to say, my throat suddenly tight. Who was there? You know, Aaron's parents, his brother and sister, his aunt and uncle from Boston. Just a small thing at Le Cirque. Le Cirque, one of the most expensive restaurants in Chicago. And just close family apparently included extended relatives who lived in another state, but not her only living parent. That sounds lovely, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I wish I could have been there to celebrate with you. Mum, you know how these things are, she said with a dismissive laugh. The Caldwells have their way of doing things. You probably wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway. So formal and stuffy. After a few more minutes of strained conversation, we hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped Kimberly with homework for years, and let the tears come. Not just for the dinner I'd missed, but for the relationship that seemed to be slipping through my fingers, despite everything I'd done to hold on to it. When the initial shock subsided, I called my best friend Diana, who had known us both since Kimberly was in elementary school. She did what? Diana exclaimed when I told her about the engagement dinner. Mattie, that's beyond thoughtless. That's deliberately hurtful. Maybe she really thought I wouldn't enjoy it, I suggested, still trying to find excuses for my daughter's behavior. Stop it, Diana said firmly. You're doing what you always do, letting her off the hook. Kimberly knows exactly what she's doing. She's choosing Aaron's family over you because they have money and connections she wants. That seems harsh, I protested, though a part of me feared she was right. Harsh, but true. And you know what else is true? You're still paying her credit card bills, even though she makes good money now. You're financing the lifestyle she needs to fit in with the Caldwells, while she pretends you don't exist when it's convenient. Diana's words stung because they contained truth I'd been avoiding. For years, I'd been enabling Kimberly's increasingly entitled behavior, hoping that generosity would keep us close. Instead, it seemed to have created a transactional relationship where I was valued for what I could provide, not who I was. Maybe it's time to close the bank of Mom, Diana suggested gently. Not to punish her, but because it's not healthy for either of you. I wasn't ready to take such a drastic step. Despite everything, I still believed that Kimberly was just going through a phase, that my real daughter was still in there somewhere beneath the social climbing and status anxiety. But as I checked my credit card statement online that night, seeing thousands of dollars in recent charges from luxury boutiques and high-end restaurants, I couldn't help but wonder if Diana was right. Was I helping my daughter, or enabling behavior that was pulling us further apart? In the weeks following the engagement dinner revelation, the pattern of exclusion only intensified. Kimberly's social media became a parade of pre-wedding celebrations I knew nothing about until after they happened. There was a spontaneous engagement weekend in Napa Valley with Aaron's college friends, a champagne brunch hosted by his sister, a wedding planning lunch with Aaron's mother at the Chicago Yacht Club. Each new post felt like another door slamming in my face. I found myself checking Instagram compulsively, both dreading and needing to know what else I was missing. Then came the wedding website. Kimberly texted me the link one morning saying, Check out our wedding site just launched today. I clicked immediately, eager for any inclusion in this important chapter of her life. The site was professionally designed with beautiful engagement photos and an elegant layout. Under Our Story, there were paragraphs about how Aaron and Kimberly met their romantic proposal and their shared dreams. Under Meet the Families, there was a lengthy, glowing description of the Caldwells, their prominence in Chicago society, their philanthropic endeavors, their family traditions. And then, almost as an afterthought, Kimberly's mother, Mattie, owns a bookstore in Pennsylvania. One sentence. No mention of our close relationship during her childhood. No acknowledgement of the sacrifices I'd made to give her every opportunity. Just a brief professional identification, as if I were a distant acquaintance, rather than the woman who had raised her single-handedly. That same afternoon, my credit card notification email alerted me to a $3,800 charge at a bridal salon in Chicago. This was on top of the $2,500 spent at various boutiques earlier that week, and the $1,200 dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant the weekend before. All charges I was expected to pay without question. As I stared at the growing list of expenses, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect, appreciation, and the fundamental nature of our relationship. Was I truly helping Kimberly by financing a lifestyle that seemed to be driving a wedge between us? Or was I simply enabling her to become someone who valued status and wealth over genuine connection? My phone rang, interrupting these troubling thoughts. It was Kimberly. "Mom, Aaron and I looked at the most amazing venue today for the wedding," she said without preamble or greeting. "The Grand Pavilion at Lakeside Gardens. It's absolutely perfect." "That sounds lovely," I replied, making an effort to be supportive despite my churning emotions. "What do you like about it?" "Everything. The ballroom has these incredible crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, and they can accommodate our guest list of 300. 300 guests. I pictured my small circle of friends and family members, maybe 20 people total, who would be coming from my side. That sounds beautiful, but also expensive, I ventured carefully. What's the price range? Well, with the premium package and Saturday date, around $60,000 for just the venue, she said casually, as if discussing the cost of lunch. But it includes the ceremony space too, so when you think about it that way, $60,000, more than my annual income from the bookstore. And that was just the venue, not including catering, flowers, music, or any of the other countless expenses a wedding entailed. "Kimberly," I said gently, "you know I want to contribute to your wedding, but that's far beyond what I can afford. My budget is much more modest." There was a pause before she responded, her tone cooling noticeably. "Mom, this is my only wedding. The Caldwells host events like this all the time. I can't ask them to downgrade because of your situation." My situation. As if my middle-class life was some unfortunate condition rather than the result of choices and sacrifices made largely for her benefit. "Maybe we could look at some alternatives," I suggested. "Something special but more within reach." "Like what, the community center back home?" she asked, with a laugh that felt like a slap. "Can you imagine Aaron's family at one of those wedding meal places with the cheap buffet and cash bar? God, they'd be horrified." I tried a different approach. "I understand wanting a beautiful wedding, Kimberly, but starting married life with massive debt isn't ideal either." "Who said anything about debt? Aaron's parents are covering most of it. I just thought you'd want to contribute something meaningful, not just token money. But whatever, it's fine. We'll figure it out." The conversation shifted then to wedding dress shopping, but the warmth had evaporated. When I tried to suggest coming to Chicago to help her look at gowns, Kimberly quickly dismissed the idea. Actually, I already have appointments with a personal stylist at Bergdorf's and Saks. Aaron's mum pulled some strings. They're bringing in designers not normally available off the rack. Very exclusive. As we wrapped up the call, I made one last attempt at meaningful connection. Honey, beyond all the wedding plans, how are you feeling about everything? Are you happy? Is Aaron treating you well? Mum, she sighed, clearly exasperated. Of course I'm happy. Aaron is perfect. His family is perfect. Everything is perfect, except these constant questions about money and feelings. Can you just be excited for me without turning everything into a therapy session? After we hung up, I sat in silence, contemplating what our relationship had become. My attempts to connect emotionally were rebuffed. My financial concerns were dismissed as penny pinching or envy. My role seemed limited to providing funds and enthusiastic approval without questions or conditions. It was becoming increasingly clear that Kimberly viewed me more as a financial resource than as a mother who deserved respect and inclusion. The realization was painful, but perhaps necessary for what would come next. The week after our tense conversation about wedding venues, my credit card statement arrived with charges totaling nearly $12,000, the highest monthly amount ever. In addition to the usual boutique shopping and restaurant bills, there were new expenses: a $4,200 deposit to a wedding photographer, $2,800 at a high-end jewelry store, and $1,500 for a bridal consultation fee. Not once had Kimberly called to discuss these expenses or ask if they were manageable for me. The assumption that I would simply pay without question had become so entrenched that communication wasn't even deemed necessary. I sat at my small desk in the back office of the bookstore, staring at the statement, a strange calm settling over me. For years, I'd been enabling this behavior out of love-guilt and a desperate hope that financial support would maintain our connection. But it had accomplished the opposite, creating an unhealthy dynamic where Kimberly took my sacrifices for granted while increasingly excluding me from her life. After a sleepless night weighing my options, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. I would not make the credit card payment this month, not as a punishment, but as a long overdue boundary. 2 days after the missed payment, my phone rang while I was restocking shelves at the bookstore. Kimberly's name flashed on the screen. "Mum," she said immediately when I answered, her voice tight with panic. "There's a problem with the card. It got declined at Vera Wang. Did you forget to pay the bill?" The question contained so many layers: the assumption that payment was my obligation, the implication that only forgetfulness could explain non-payment, the complete absence of any consideration that I might have made a deliberate choice. "No, Kimberly," I replied, keeping my voice steady and calm. "I didn't forget to pay it this time." There was a moment of confusion before understanding dawned. "Wait, you mean you chose not to pay it, Mom? That's my credit card." I'm standing here mortified in front of the bridal consultant. "Actually, it's my credit card," I corrected gently. "You're an authorized user on my account, an arrangement that was supposed to be temporary when you were in college." "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she said, her voice rising. "Over what you're punishing me because you're jealous of Aaron's family, because you felt left out of the engagement dinner." "This isn't punishment, Kimberly. It's a necessary boundary. And yes, being excluded from your engagement dinner hurt deeply, as did being reduced to a one-sentence afterthought on your wedding website. As does hearing you dismiss my financial concerns as irrelevant to your perfect wedding plans. So this is your revenge, humiliating me in public and damaging my credit score." "This isn't about revenge. It's about recognizing an unhealthy pattern in our relationship that I've enabled for too long. You're an adult with a good job. It's time you managed your own finances, rather than expecting me to fund a lifestyle beyond my means. There was a moment of silence before Kimberly's voice turned cold. I see. So all those times you said you'd always be there for me, that you'd do anything for me, that was conditional. My love is unconditional, Kimberly, but my financial support can't be. Not when it's taken for granted, and not when it comes at the expense of mutual respect. Respect. She almost laughed. Is that what this is about? You know why I didn't invite you to the engagement dinner? Because Aaron's family comes from a different world. His mother went to finishing school in Switzerland. His father golfs with senators. What would they think of my mother with her little failing bookstore and unfashionable clothes? How would you even know which fork to use at Le Cirque? Her words cut deeper than any knife, confirming my worst fears. My daughter was ashamed of me. If that's how you see me, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice from breaking, then perhaps it's best I step back from the wedding planning altogether. I'll attend as a guest if you still want me there, but I won't pretend to be someone I'm not, to impress people who judge others by their bank accounts rather than their character. Fine, Kimberly snapped. Keep your money. I don't need it anyway. Aaron's parents will cover everything. They actually care about my happiness. I care deeply about your happiness, Kimberly. But I also care about your character, which seems to have gotten lost somewhere between college graduation and meeting the Caldwells. Oh, spare me the moral lecture. You know what? Maybe it's better if you don't come to the wedding at all. It would be easier for everyone. Those words hung in the air between us, shocking in their casual cruelty. If that's what you want, I finally said, my heart breaking but my resolve firm. It is, she replied, and hung up. I placed my phone down on the counter, hands trembling, but mind surprisingly clear. For the first time in years, perhaps I had stood up for my own worth, instead of sacrificing it on the altar of my daughter's approval. The cost had been higher than I could have imagined, potentially my relationship with my only child, but the alternative was continuing a pattern that was destroying us both. That night alone in my quiet house, I cried for everything that had been lost. Not just the wedding I might not attend, but the relationship I had believed in, the daughter I thought I knew, and the future I had imagined where Kimberly and I would always remain close despite life's changes. But amid the grief, there was also a small surprising spark of something that felt like freedom. In the aftermath of our confrontation, I experienced a strange mixture of grief and relief. The grief was expected, mourning the relationship I thought I had with my daughter and the future I had envisioned. But the relief caught me by surprise. For years I had been walking on eggshells, carefully managing my speech and behavior to avoid disappointing Kimberly or triggering her judgment. Now that the worst had happened, her explicit rejection, a weight had been lifted. The day after our phone call, I met Diana for coffee at the small cafe next to my bookstore. I recounted the conversation, still raw from Kimberly's hurtful words. "I'm so sorry, Mattie," Diana said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "But I'm also proud of you for finally setting a boundary." "I may have lost my daughter," I said, tears threatening again. "You haven't lost her," Diana assured me. "You've just stopped losing yourself in trying to please her. There's a difference. And if Kimberly has any of the values you raised her with still intact, somewhere she'll come to see that." Diana's perspective helped, but I still needed to deal with the practical implications of my decision. The following day, I made an appointment with a financial advisor recommended by another small business owner in town. Margaret Delaney's office was modest but professional, much like Margaret herself. She listened attentively as I explained my financial situation, the years of paying Kimberly's expenses, the remortgaged house, the depleted retirement accounts. "I see this more often than you might think," Margaret said when I finished. Parents who sacrifice their financial security for adult children, often without the children even realizing the extent of it. She ran the numbers and confirmed what I had feared at 56. My retirement savings were dangerously inadequate. If I continued on the same path, I would likely need to work well into my 70s, possibly selling the bookstore I loved to make ends meet. The good news, Margaret continued, is that it's not too late to make changes. Cancelling the credit card arrangement was a necessary first step. Now we need to create a plan to rebuild your financial security. Over the next 2 hours, we developed a strategy, cutting unnecessary expenses, increasing retirement contributions, exploring ways to make the bookstore more profitable, and establishing a realistic timeline for debt reduction. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control over my financial future. With Margaret's help, I officially removed Kimberly as an authorized user on my credit card and closed the account altogether, replacing it with a new card solely in my name. I also consulted with a therapist who specialized in family relationships, beginning the emotional work of examining the codependency that had characterized my relationship with my daughter. Dr. Fenton helped me understand how my fear of abandonment after Mark left had influenced my parenting. "You've been trying to buy Kimberly's love and presence in your life," she observed gently. "But real connection can't be purchased." Meanwhile, I refocused on the bookstore, which had suffered from my divided attention. I expanded our children's storytime program, created a new book club for seniors, and partnered with the local coffee shop to offer reading brunches on Sundays. Small changes, but they brought new energy and customers to the store. I also reconnected with friends and community groups I'd neglected. I joined a local hiking club that met on Saturday mornings, volunteered at the town's literacy program, and accepted dinner invitations. I might have previously declined to keep my schedule open for Kimberly's rare visits. 3 weeks passed with no contact from my daughter. No calls, no texts, not even social media activity that I could see. The silence was painful, but also instructive. It showed how one-sided our relationship had become, if 3 weeks without my financial support was enough for complete radio silence. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the bell above the bookstore door chimed, and I looked up from the register to see Aaron Caldwell standing awkwardly among the display of new releases. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, approaching the counter. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "It's just Mattie," I corrected automatically. "And no, you're not interrupting. This is unexpected." Aaron glanced around the empty store. "Could we talk privately for a few minutes?" I led him to the small reading nook in the back, curious about what had prompted this visit from the man who was still presumably planning to marry my daughter, despite our estrangement. "Kimberly doesn't know I'm here," he said once we were seated. "In fact, she'd probably be furious if she found out." "Then why risk her anger?" I asked. Aaron sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Because I'm confused and concerned. The woman Kimberly described to me after your fight doesn't match what I've learned about you from other sources." "What sources?" "Her childhood friend Jordan was in town last week. We had dinner, and she talked about how amazing you were during Kimberly's childhood, working multiple jobs, never missing her dance recitals, despite your schedule creating all these special traditions." It didn't sound like the cold, controlling mother Kimberly described. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Jordan, who had apparently remembered our history more accurately than my own daughter. "Then there's the credit card situation," Aaron continued. "Kimberly told me you cut her off financially to manipulate her. But when I asked more questions, I learned you've been paying her credit card bills for years, even after she started working. Is that true?" I nodded. "Since college. It was supposed to be temporary to help her build credit." "And the charges, thousands every month." "Yes. I paid them because I wanted to support her to stay connected somehow. Aaron looked genuinely shocked. Mrs. Reynolds, Mattie, she never told me any of this. I assumed she was financially independent. I had no idea she was depending on you to fund her lifestyle. What exactly did she tell you about me, Aaron? He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. That you were bitter about her success, jealous of our relationship, that you'd always been emotionally withholding and now were using money to control her. The character assassination hurt, but wasn't entirely surprising given Kimberly's recent behavior. And you believed that I had no reason not to, he said defensively. But things haven't been adding up lately. Kimberly's been anxious about money suddenly, shopping less. She said her discretionary budget was temporarily reduced due to portfolio adjustments, which didn't make sense given her job. That would be because her portfolio was actually her mother's credit card, I said dryly. Aaron had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm starting to see that. But what I don't understand is why she would hide the truth from me. We're supposed to be getting married. There shouldn't be these kinds of secrets. I considered my words carefully. Despite everything, I didn't want to damage Kimberly's relationship if she truly loved this man. People sometimes create narratives that protect their self-image, Aaron. Kimberly has been working hard to fit into your world. Perhaps acknowledging her financial dependence on her middle-class mother that didn't fit the story she was trying to tell. To you, to your family, maybe even to herself. He nodded slowly. That makes sense, actually. Since she met my parents, there's been this pressure she puts on herself. I've told her they don't care about any of that status stuff. They're actually pretty down to earth despite the money. But she's always worried about saying the wrong thing, wearing the wrong outfit. We talked for nearly an hour. I was careful not to vilify Kimberly while still being honest about our relationship and the recent conflict. Aaron listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a more substantial person than the wealthy stereotype I had assumed him to be. As he prepared to leave, he paused. For what it's worth, I think Kimberly made a huge mistake excluding you from the engagement dinner, and from everything else. If we get married, I want you there. Not just at the wedding, but in our lives. If you get married, I questioned. Aaron shrugged, suddenly looking younger than his 30 years. I have some thinking to do about who Kimberly really is and what values are important in the person I spend my life with. A week after Aaron's visit, Kimberly appeared at my front door. It was early evening, and I had just returned from a community garden meeting. She stood on the porch, makeup perfectly applied as always, but her eyes red-rimmed beneath the careful concealer. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. I stepped aside to let her enter my heart, pounding with a mixture of hope and apprehension. In my living room, Kimberly perched on the edge of the sofa, looking around as if seeing the familiar space with new eyes. "Aaron came to see you," she said. Not a question. "Yes, he did. He knows about the credit card now. About everything." Her tone was accusatory, as if I had betrayed her by being honest. "I didn't seek him out, Kimberly. He came to me with questions. I answered truthfully." She nodded stiffly. "He's rethinking the engagement." I sat down across from her. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is that why you're here? Because Aaron is questioning things?" "Partly," she admitted, and I appreciated the honesty. "But also because I've had time to think about what happened between us, about what you said." "And," I prompted when she fell silent. "And some of it was true," she conceded reluctantly. "I have been taking you for granted, financially and otherwise." It wasn't a full apology, but it was more self-awareness than Kimberly had shown in years. I remained silent, waiting. "I'm not saying you were right about everything," she continued. a flash of the defiance I knew so well crossing her face. The engagement dinner was Aaron's parents' thing. I couldn't just demand they invite you. Did you ask them to include me? She looked away. No, she admitted. I thought it would be awkward. You're so different from them. Different doesn't mean less than Kimberly. I may not have their money or social connections, but I deserve basic respect, especially from my daughter. Tears filled her eyes. I know, I just got caught up in it all. The Caldwells, their world. It felt like everything I ever wanted. Like if I could just fit in perfectly, I'd finally be enough. There it was. The insecurity that had been driving her behavior. Not so different from my own fear of losing her that had led me to enable her financially for years. You've always been enough, I said softly. Just as you are. Not because of designer clothes or influential connections, or the right table at the right restaurant. Just because you're you. I've known that since the day you were born. Kimberly broke down, then crying in earnest. Not the calculated tears I'd seen her use to get her way in the past, but genuine, messy sobbing. I moved to sit beside her, putting an arm around her shoulders, as I had countless times during her childhood. I've made such a mess of everything, she choked out. Aaron barely speaks to me. His mother keeps asking questions I can't answer. And I've hurt you so much. Relationships can heal, I said carefully, but it takes honesty, and work, and time. We talked for hours that evening. There were difficult moments. Kimberly still struggled to take full responsibility for her actions, still tried to justify some of her hurtful behaviors. But there were also glimpses of the thoughtful, warm-hearted girl I remembered peeking through the polished facade she had constructed. By the time she left, we had reached a tentative truce. I would attend the wedding if it proceeded, but I wouldn't be financing it. Kimberly would work on being more inclusive and respectful. We would try to rebuild trust through small, consistent actions rather than grand promises. As I walked her to her car, Kimberly turned to me. Aaron's mother is hosting a bridal tea next month. Would you come? I know it's not your usual scene, but I'd like you to be there. It was a small olive branch, but a meaningful one. I'd like that, I said. I'll just be myself, though. No pretending to be someone I'm not. Kimberly nodded. That's fair. She hesitated before adding, maybe that's what Aaron saw in you that day at the bookstore. Just authenticity. As I watched her drive away, I felt cautiously optimistic. The road to repairing our relationship would be long and likely bumpy, but at least we had taken the first steps. 6 months later, standing in the back of a church much smaller and more charming than the grand cathedral Kimberly had originally envisioned, I reflected on how much had changed since that pivotal phone call about the declined credit card. The wedding was happening after all, though it looked quite different from the lavish affair first planned. After much soul-searching and several heart-to-heart conversations, Aaron and Kimberly had decided to proceed with their marriage, but on a more authentic foundation. The guest list had been cut from 300 to 80. The venue changed from the $60,000 Grand Pavilion to Aaron's family's lakeside property, beautiful in its own right, but without the hefty price tag. Most significantly, Kimberly had taken responsibility for her own finances. She had applied for her own credit card, created a realistic budget based on her actual income, and even started contributing to a retirement account on her financial advisor's recommendation. The transition hadn't been easy. There were tearful phone calls about having to say no to weekend trips with wealthy friends, and frustrations about delayed gratification. But slowly she was building financial independence and the self-respect that came with it. Our relationship had evolved too. The unquestioning bank of Mom was permanently closed, but in its place, a more balanced mother-daughter dynamic was emerging. We spoke weekly, and while we still occasionally hit rough patches, there was a new honesty between us. Kimberly had even started helping at the bookstore during her visits home, reconnecting with the love of literature she'd abandoned during her social climbing years. Aaron had proved to be more substantial than I initially gave him credit for. After discovering Kimberly's financial dependence on me and her deliberate exclusion of me from important events, he had insisted on postponing the wedding until they had addressed these issues. His willingness to confront uncomfortable truths and stand by his values had ultimately strengthened their relationship. More surprisingly, Aaron's family had welcomed me with unexpected warmth once Kimberly stopped trying to keep us apart. His mother, Catherine, was not the snobbish socialite of my imagination, but a thoughtful woman who, despite her privilege, volunteered weekly at a women's shelter and had built a substantial children's library at the local hospital. She had even visited my bookstore during a trip to see Aaron's grandmother, purchasing several novels and inviting me to join her book club's Zoom meetings. As for me, the enforced recalibration of my identity beyond just being Kimberly's mum had been challenging but ultimately liberating. My bookstore was thriving thanks to new community partnerships and an online presence built by a local college student who worked part-time for me. I had developed new friendships through my hiking group and volunteer work. And I had finally begun rebuilding my retirement savings with Margaret Delaney's continued guidance. The music changed, signaling the start of the processional. I watched as Aaron's siblings walked down the aisle, followed by his parents. Then it was my turn. Kimberly had asked if I would like to be escorted by Aaron's father, but I had chosen to walk alone, not out of bitterness, but as a statement of my independence and strength. As I moved down the aisle, I caught Kimberly's eye, where she waited in the vestibule with her bridesmaid. She gave me a small, genuine smile, not the practiced, photo-ready smile she had perfected over recent years, but the real one I remembered from her childhood. I smiled back, my heart full. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. When asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" I responded clearly. "She gives herself with my blessing and love." It was a small but significant change to the traditional wording, acknowledging both Kimberly's autonomy and my support. At the reception, I sat at a table with Diana Aaron's grandmother and several of Kimberly's colleagues I had met during recent visits to Chicago. The conversation flowed easily without the anxiety I had once felt about saying the wrong thing or using the wrong fork. During the mother-son dance, Catherine Caldwell approached my table. "Aaron told me what you did," she said, sitting down beside me. "Standing up to Kimberly when she was making poor choices, even though it meant risking your relationship. That takes tremendous courage." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "Parenting never is," she agreed. "Our situations may look different on the surface, but we both want the same thing. Children who are not just successful, but good people. Kind, ethical, grounded." Kimberly lost sight of that for a while, I said. "We both did in different ways." Catherine nodded. Aaron was concerned about the values he was seeing. He's always been the family conscience, even as a boy. She smiled fondly toward her son, now dancing with his new wife. "He said you helped him see things more clearly." "I just told him the truth." "Sometimes that's the most valuable gift we can offer," Catherine said. "I hope we'll see more of each other, Mattie. I think we could be friends." After dinner and toasts, Kimberly sought me out on the dance floor. "Mum, thank you for everything," she said, embracing me tightly. "For being here today, and for not being here that day with the credit card." I laughed softly. An unusual thing to thank someone for. "But true," she insisted. "If you had kept enabling me, I don't think Aaron and I would be here today. He needed to see who I really was, good and bad, before committing. And I needed to see it too." And who are you really? I asked, genuinely curious about her self-perception after these months of change. She considered the question seriously. I'm still figuring that out, but I know I'm someone who wants to make you proud, not just by what I achieve or acquire, but by who I am, how I treat people, the values I live by. It was the answer I had waited years to hear. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this day. The painful confrontation over the credit card had been a turning point, forcing both Kimberly and me to examine patterns that weren't serving either of us. Her using me as a financial crutch, while keeping me at arm's length emotionally. Me enabling her dependence while hoping it would buy her love and presence in my life. Breaking that cycle had been painful but necessary. It had allowed Kimberly to develop genuine financial independence and self-reliance. It had freed me to reclaim my identity beyond motherhood and rebuild my own financial security. And most importantly, it had created space for a healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. I thought of other parents who might be caught in similar dynamics with their adult children, providing financial support that was expected rather than appreciated, sacrificing their own security for children capable of supporting themselves, using money as a substitute for boundaries and honest communication. It was a common pattern, one that ultimately served neither parent nor child. The true gift of parental love sometimes means stepping back, allowing adult children to experience the natural consequences of their choices, not out of punishment or abandonment, but out of respect for their capacity to learn and grow through challenges. It had been the hardest parenting lesson I'd ever had to learn, but also the most valuable. As Kimberly moved forward into her married life with Aaron, I had faith that the values I had instilled in her early years, kindness, gratitude, integrity, would continue to re-emerge. The facade of materialism and status-seeking that had temporarily obscured those values was already cracking, revealing glimpses of the authentic, caring woman beneath. And as for me, I was discovering that the second half of life held possibilities I hadn't imagined. My bookstore was not just surviving, but thriving. My finances were slowly but steadily improving. My social circle had expanded to include interesting, supportive friends. I was no longer defined solely by my role as Kimberly's mother, but as a woman with her own dreams, interests, and worth. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But by finding the courage to set necessary boundaries, both Kimberly and I had found our way to something better than what we had before. A relationship based on authentic love, rather than financial transactions or social climbing. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? Perhaps a child who had grown to take your support for granted? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more authentic life stories. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey, please share it with them. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing we can do is stand firm in our own worth and allow others the dignity of standing in theirs. Thank you for listening to my story.